What can we learn from Bill and Ted about cinematography and theme? At face value, it looks like a kitschy movie without a lot of depth, but there are a few surprising levels to the film. First, we can see pretty clearly that Bill and Ted are consistently framed throughout the entire movie. Bill is on the left, and Ted is on the right. This is also their title order, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Bill and Ted Left to Right. This helps us remember who's whom, especially since both characters act alike. So having them consistently framed and in title order helps us recognize them. Plus, they say each other's name constantly.
Catch you later, Bill and Ted!
Even when they need to incorporate a nod shot, they maintain Bill is in front, Ted is behind, giving us a stacking order. Another nice thing about consistent framing is that it builds familiarity with the characters and maintains that connection through many period pieces, keeping us firmly grounded no matter where or when we find ourselves. However, the best part of using this visual language is that once you've set the rule, then you can break it with intention. In times of stress or confusion, their positions are reversed, like in this shot where they're fleeing medieval execution. Bill is on the right, but also behind Ted, and immediately in the next shot we can see their normal positions are regained. Fixing the antenna in 1 million BC, Ted on the left, that is so gross, Bill on the right.
Thanks, guys.
And when they realize they've lost Napoleon. This adds a layer of visual tension that is very subtle, making things just feel out of sorts. Suddenly an entire world of left to right, shorter to taller, lighter colors to darker colors, Bill to Ted are all out of place until they're right again. There's also a pretty funny analogy that the characters foreshadow at the very start.
The truth is, Wild Stallions will never be a super band until we have Eddie Van Halen on guitar.
Yes, Bill, but I do not believe we will get Eddie Van Halen until we have a triumphant video.
Ted, it's pointless to have a triumphant video before we even have decent instruments.
Well, how can we have decent instruments when we don't really even know how to play?
That is why we need Eddie Van Halen.
And that is why we need a triumphant video. Excellent!
They're describing a paradox that they themselves would fall into when Rufus gains their trust from their future selves, vouching for Rufus.
Listen to this dude, Rufus. He knows what he's talking about.
Hitting the same circular logic described in the Van Halen problem. It's a nod from the writers that they're aware of the issue, but that it doesn't bother the characters or the world that we're entering.
Yeah, we gotta get back to the report.
Finally, what about the historical figures? Why these particular people? Each of these figures add to the underlying theme of the story, which is that anyone, no matter their circumstances, can forever change history. Genghis Khan came from abject poverty, Joan of Arc was born a peasant and died only at the age of 19. Socrates came from obscurity and became the father of modern thought. Lincoln came from poverty, Napoleon was a general at the age of 24, Billy the Kid was orphaned at 14, Beethoven a virtuoso as a child, and Freud was a geek. The point is that these were new heroes for Bill and Ted to look to and see that the future Rufus says they're responsible for is not impossible. That if they look throughout history, there's plenty of examples of broke kids from obscurity changing the course of history by chasing their dreams. You can listen to the full Bill and Ted podcast episode at thepestlepodcast.com/Bill and Ted.